Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 235 of Retro Power Uncut, and I'm back from my Holly Bobs. I didn't really go anywhere particularly exciting. Went up in the Peak District and had a look round up there and visited in-laws and got a few jobs done around the house. But I'm back this week with a vengeance. As you can see, I've got my best clothes on because I've been grovelling around on the floor. I was going to put a nice new shirt on for the video, but I thought, no, I'm going to be in my rags as I was grovelling on the floor a minute ago. So we're going to start with the E-Type, and Matthew has been doing some work in the earlier part of the week on this, all to do with accommodating the HVAC unit, which we've touched on before, mentioned before. You've seen a lot of CAD with George. George is particularly enjoying designing all of that. He's been tearing hair out over that one and juggling a ridiculously small amount of space for some time, but he's got it sorted. It's all in, and then it's all in place. There's various provisioning for plumbing and dryer and things like that to be accounted for, which is in progress. But it then needed a footwell, basically a plate for the passenger to potentially rest feet against, or at least put an end in the footwell. So Matt yesterday got that plate made. That's in 2mm NS4 or 5251 H22 aluminium. So he's made a foot plate down there, which is really nice and strong. And then he fired up the Powell's machine, the Nibbler, Pull Max, most people would know it as, but as is a Henry Powell's machine. Fired that up. That's the first time Matt's used that. Just sort of shows the balance of use of machinery in here, because he's been here a while now. I can't actually remember now, but certainly considerably more than 12 months. And that's the first time he's used that machine. But the benefit of that is it will put a very, very clean, tidy, distortion-free bead into, or relatively distortion-free bead into, really strong materials. Like 5251 aluminium is tough stuff. Particularly in a 2mm thickness, you certainly would struggle with our bead roller, and a lot of bead rollers won't put a very clean bead into 2mm aluminium, or if they do, they pull the material to it, pull the material into the bead, and it makes it a lot of distortion, whereas the Pull Max will stretch that bead in. As you can see, it's a really crisp job that's left of that. So that's another machine Matt's got familiar with now. So that's where we're at on that. That's being stopped with the workshop work just for a minute, because we're waiting for a little bit more from the CAD chaps, really hinging on the rear lights and the number plate flip mechanism. As you'll know, I handed that task to Luke to do the mechanism for that and design the bit for the actuator and everything, and he's done that now. We're getting there with that now, but he's just got a few bits of finalising to do, and then we can get on with the fabrication on that. So that's where we're at on that. Moving on swiftly from that, we're going to come on to Scimitar, and we've touched on it briefly, but we haven't really gone into a lot of detail, and I've actually got a few hours done on it this week, and a little bit of background to the project for those who are new to it, is we are basically making a carbon fibre, slightly wider bodied SE5 Reliant SCIMITAR, with carbon fibre outer panels, carbon fibre inner panels, sitting on a new build stretched TVR type chassis, Chimera-ish chassis, but stretched by 300 and something millimetres, which was built for us by Sport Motive in Stoke-on-Trent. And so we've got carbon fibre body, TVR-ish chassis, and then we are using a Rickwood Motorsport built 4-litre all aluminium dry sumped Cosworth GAA, new build Cosworth GAA engine, which is a 24 valve 4-litre, originally built based on the Essex 3-litre V6, which is what these cars had originally. This is a 4-litre variant of that, which isn't permissible for racing, but obviously this isn't a racing car, and the extra capacity is always good to have. The homologated engine for racing was a 3.4 litre as used in Capri touring cars, and in period it generated somewhere in the region of 450 horsepower from its 3.4 litres. We will be in the same ballpark power-wise, but from 4 litres, milder cams, less racy engine, and running electronic fuel injection, which again isn't permissible in the touring cars. And then all of that is driving via a 5-speed ZF S5 18.3 transmission, I think I've got the numbers right there, which was built by Martin Jones, MJT, Martin Jones Transmissions, who's very well known for historic Ford Escort, ZF transmissions, etc. He's kind of the man when it comes to those transmissions and keeps a lot of parts. We wanted a gearbox with a set of Lotus Sunbeam ratios in it because they tie in nicely with the engine and the fact it's a road car while still being a sporty set of ratios that will be close enough to make the car fun to drive. So that's all worked out quite well. We've got all those pieces in place. I'm literally about to bolt the engine and gearbox together and the wrong bolts have turned up. Need some 3/8 UNC by 1.5" bolts to bolt the two together, and some metric ones have turned up. Somebody's mispicked there. But anyway, that doesn't really matter because the other thing I wanted to get done is we're going to have a visit from the owners of this car imminently, and we wanted to get the body sat in the correct position on the chassis at a proposed ride height. And with a seat and some pedals in the car, and preferably a steering wheel as well, although that's slightly less critical because we can hold that. So to that end, I have just this morning fitted the tack welded in place the outriggers that we're going to use on the chassis. The materials turned up from Tamworth Steel this morning. That's 60 by 40 by 2mm wall ERW tube, which has turned up this morning. So I've got those cut and tacked in place, and they're now sitting basically, give or take, where the Scimitar chassis originally sat under the body. So they're substituting that same place, and it actually substitutes it really, really well. The chassis does fit remarkably well. The only area of issue is the footwells are quite narrow in the front, which we knew was going to be an issue. We're going to do a tweak to the chassis, which I talked to Ian at Sport Motive about, but the conclusion was I'd be better to do it here because I didn't actually know how it needed modifying until we tried the body on it. The CAD could get us close, but there's always physically sitting in the car is a bit different to looking at it on a screen, so we decided to do that here. So we're going to tweak the chassis there. But yeah, now this body is now sitting on the chassis, sat on its mounts. There's no diagonal supports for the outriggers, so they're a little bit wobbly at the moment. But that's how that all goes, and it's remarkable how well it fits in the back as well. You'll be able to see that the original Scimitar boot floor actually sits pretty much perfectly on top of the diff carrier section of the rear of the TVR chassis. Obviously we will be modifying that, we'll be making a new one. Obviously all of the composite material on this will be new in the final build, but it's interesting how well it all does actually sit in there, and hopefully this will have been a good plan. It's certainly looking that way at the moment. So yeah, the next stages on this are to get some more outriggers tacked in place to support a seat and a pedal box. And then we've got the crux that we need, the core of what we need to be able to get our customers for this car to be able to sit in it, check there's more than one customer that this is being built for, and to check that they all will fit. We're planning to use an adjustable pedal box for that so that we can make the seating have small adjustments and the steering wheel not need too much adjusting. We're making the pedals, putting a tilt and position adjustable pedal box in it. Well, that's the plan again at the moment, that's the plan. But we're going to put some substitute pedals in for the moment just to dummy that up, just to check whether everything's going to work. And obviously the keen-eyed, or not even very keen-eyed, will have spotted that I've had to ruin the wheel arches. I've had to do that to get some wheel clearance with the wheels at ride height and the body at what we think is the correct height on the chassis. I've had to cut those wheel arches out, so they've been reasonably roughly just cut out of the way to get some wheel clearance. Obviously, the people those of you that have watched this channel for a while will be aware that the car is going to have much wider bodywork and will all be new, and you'll have probably seen the renderings of the car that George has done showing that wider bodywork. So you'll be familiar with what's going on there, because these are obviously not the final wheels on the car. I noticed a couple of comments in previous episodes where somebody was commenting about the fact that the wheels were bent. These were some scrap wheels that Ian at Sport Motive kindly lent to us just to keep the car rolling until we made our wheel decisions. Once they're done, they'll go back to him so he can use them as some mule wheels for just wheeling TVRs around on when they haven't got wheels on. That's what he uses them for. So yeah, they're nothing. They won't be the final wheels on the car, and they won't even be staying here. They'll be going back up to Ian as soon as we finish wheeling the car around on them. So that's what's going on there. I think I've elaborated enough on that. And I'm going to walk this way a little bit. Bobby is obviously busy. I always say people are busy, of course they're busy, but Bobby's extremely busy on getting these side structures in place on the Saab, and it's really getting to a very, I always say it's exciting, it really is a very exciting stage in that all of this structure that's been on show for a long time on the sides of this car is getting closed in now, and that's really a good moment. You can actually see how all of basically Bobby's plans, it's pretty much solely his work. 99% of it is Bobby's plans, really. He has tied in these slightly strange rolled sections that Saab use for their pillar structure, which is like an open, non-welded, roll-formed section, which was tied into very little on the original Saab. It kind of floated near the A panel and had a couple of tack welds on it, and that was about it. That's now tied into the inner A post. And then tied onto that is this short section of tube, which is then tied onto the sort of antler tube that is now strengthening up the inner wing. That's tied into the door hinge mounts. The door hinge mounts are all welded to the inner A post. The outer A post fits all over that, boxes all that in. Sills are on. Bobby was finally doing the finished spot welding on that this morning, getting the sills on, so the sill boxes are on both sides. The body sides are attached completely now, so the top body shell is now, the 900 shell is now well attached to the Audi. And really the next stages are to get all this boxed in, but the stage before that is going to be just finalising all the titivation around the water drains, because it's quite a complicated bit of water handling through this pillar to avoid water being able to get in anywhere it shouldn't. So there's finalising that, doing a lot of weld dressing and tidying, and then doing some coating of all of this, because we can't get at that once that's enclosed. So again, that's all got to be coated, and then the forward section of the door closing section, should I say, of the A pillar can go in, and the forward section of the A pillar can go in, and then the reinforcer that comes along here that boxes all of this section can go in. The ends are capped, they're going to be drilled and tapped, so we've got a bolt point there to bolt on our front carrier that's going to carry the cooler pack, bumper, front body work, slam panel, etc. That'll all be bolted onto the original Audi chassis rails, plus some bolt points here. So that's all removable sort of crash structure, if you like, on the front. So really, really good progress. Lots of very, very detailed work. A lot of thinking 10 steps ahead of every move to avoid making mistakes that then can't be accessed later. So Bobby's been doing very, very well at just quietly in his little zone, getting on with that and planning ahead so he doesn't sort of paint himself into a corner, metaphorically speaking. So yeah, really, really good progress, really impressive work, looking really good. As a case in point, when it comes to thinking ahead, I've just seen something here, seen a prop here that's just reminded me. We're putting a duct, well Bobby is putting, I say we, Bobby's doing it, putting a duct in for the wiring to come into the door shut so that we can feed it into the flexible conduits that feed the wiring into the door, and there will be a reasonable amount of electrics in the door, and these are electric windows, central locking, undoubtedly something else I've forgotten, which will need to be in the door, speakers most probably in the doors as well. To get that wiring in, it can be a bit of a trial, so we're putting some quite large ducting through the pillar. We'll do that in stainless steel. That's actually going to be in this 1.5 inch stainless steel hygienic tube, which will form a nice smooth curve that'll be welded through the pillar. Being in stainless steel, it won't need internally coating to prevent it corroding. Obviously, you can get some corrosion at the end where it's welded into the mild steel, but fundamentally it's not going to rot terribly in there. That will be socketed through the inner A pillar and then through the inner A panel and then through the back face of the A pillar. Well, it'll be welded onto the back face of the A pillar, and then the grommet will go onto a little ring on the end of that. And that will enable us to easily get the wiring through with no hang-ups halfway through, no damage to the insulation, smooth transition and no rust. So there's a bit of some of the sort of thinking ahead that goes on there. Once all that's in place, it's getting the scuttle panel attached and doing the reinforcing sections that are basically going to connect the Saab scuttle to the Audi inner scuttle and enable us to run the wiper mechanism. But more to come on that. Bobby will show you through doing all the wiper stuff in weeks to come. But yeah, really good progress. Everything's coming together remarkably well. So it's been a battle compared to putting an Allegro body on an Integra floor pan. This one's been a lot more of a fighter, purely because of the width, needing to move the door hinge points outwards, and some of the body lines have fought us a little bit, and the sealing systems have been a bit of a battle because Saab's sealing system is bizarre and their door hinging arrangement is equally bizarre. And that has made quite a lot of work, a disproportionate amount of work has been used in dealing with door hinging and sealing systems. So we've learned that Saab have strange ways of doing things on those cars. They're very dissimilar to anything else we've worked with. So, right, moving on from that, there's so much going on this week. I mean, you're going to get bored of me talking about things. Something fell off an Aston Martin. We'll come on to the Aston in a minute, but as you can see, quite a large piece of it's come off as I walk past. You won't help but notice that, so we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll come on to the E9. Now we've had Martin, handyman, who I've seen plenty of comments praising Martin for his multitasking ability, his ability to be a handyman and do panel work and do metal work and do bits of all sorts of things due to his sort of years of experience doing a variety of work and his experience from working at Leaping Cats where he was fabrication shop foreman. So he's a very useful chap to have. He's turned his hand to helping Stu on here, which is no mean feat because Stu sets quite a high standard to work with, and he doesn't like people dipping their oar into his work if they're not going to maintain this high standard. So it's a good sign that Martin's still working okay and hasn't been attacked by Stu. So this is all good. So Martin has done some of the smaller repairs, but quite tricky repairs on the scuttle area. Now there's a little bit more here to do, but I think that will weld up. But he's repaired that end of the this front scuttle area where there was quite considerable corrosion. He's got that repaired, and the top rear part of the inner wing repaired where that joined on. Got all that porosity dealt with over there, and got the that was very much like a tea bag over there. So he's got that sorted, and then he's been repairing the A pillar on that side. The A pillar damage that side was not horrendous. There was a fair bit of damage, but not too bad. We've got some repair sections from. I can't remember the name of the guy. Wolof Nesh is how the name comes up, but it's two names, Wolof and Nesh, I think, but I can't actually remember. German company, supplied all the panels. The panels are extremely good. I'll refer to them correctly next week, and I'll try and get their name, and we'll put a link to their website perhaps. They've been very, very good. The panels are excellent. As you can see, these are the scuttle to A-pillar repair sections, but the substructure is going to need repair. Basically got it undoubtedly the wrong way around. That's the one for the other side. Basically, some of the substructure underneath these needs repair as well. But we're very, very happy with the fit. Everything looks like it's working really well. Then moving on to this side, which is probably the more relevant side because this has had more hours on it. Stu's been blitzing through this. There's been a couple of challenging areas where he's been working out the order of being able to do things, in that Stu's had to basically fit the inner B-pillar structure to the inner sill prior to fitting the outer sill, which meant he had to get the inner sill in place, clamped up, screwed in place, then mock up the B-pillar, get all that, the inner part of the B-pillar, get all that to fit. Once that was all fitted, then take the sill off to be able to weld it all properly, coat it all properly, and then put it all back on again. So there's been a bit of backwards and forwards there. He's got all that in place. He finished off this repair work at the back that I think we mentioned 2 weeks ago. He got all that done, got all the bottom of the pillar cleaned up, and then just today he's got all of that tacked in place, everything ready for final spot welding. But he wants to weld the bottom of the pillars up first prior to spot welding, but then he's moved on to repairing the A panel, as I would call it here, and the front of the A post. The A posts are actually quite good condition on this car. Strangely, some parts of the car are terrible and some parts are really quite good. And the front parts of the A pillar had a small section here that was a bit poorly. The rest was quite good, but he's put a larger repair in. The repair sections we got were quite big, so he's just put the whole lot in because there was a little bit of surface pitting on the rest, so he's just put a larger piece in. As you can see, all that in flush, ground off, so you'd never know it had been done. While that was off, he cleaned up any stuff on the inside of the pillar, but to be honest, there was a lot of wax oil inside the pillar and not a lot of corrosion, so that was all looking pretty good. Then he's actually split, I'm just double check that was what happened. Yes, this A panel comes back to the door shut line, as is common to most cars of sort of this era and most eras really. But the rear section had no corrosion at all, and removing it further back than this seam here involves unpicking it from the dashboard and the scuttle and actually removal of the steel dash. So rather than doing that, Stu's split this panel off down behind that spot weld line there, fitted the new panel, welded it in flush, ground the welds back, then fitted this and spot welded it in place. He's cut this section out here of the footwell. This was corroded at the outer edge anyway. He's cut that back to enable him to get in with the spot welder and spot weld that, after he's flush MIG welded this section in down there. So that's all looking really tidy now. As you can see, it's starting to take shape and look more like a car again. I think one of the next sections he's going to move on to is this section of the inner wing, though he did have a plan in his head and a certain order of things, and I can't remember all of it, so we'll have to find out next week. But yes, we've got repair sections for these footwells, which extend all the way up to the top here where the seam is, and that will replace all the rot there. And it's really quite nice working with not having to make every repair section. It's a pretty major step forward, that, and really useful step forward, being able to just use repairs that actually fit. Because that's the other thing. Most of the time when we buy repair panels, they don't seem to be anywhere near fitting, and then the work's almost as bad as having to make them to start with. But this is a thumbs up for our repair panels on this. A very good job. Stu's doing a lovely job. He's quite enjoying this, I think. Reading his body language, he's a man of few words. He's a man of fairly few words to us, and you'll have noticed he's a man of few words on camera. But he's very good at this work. I was commenting earlier to one of our other guys that Stu can work so fast and to such a high standard on this type of repair work. He's done it for a long time. It was his bread and butter for many years, and he's just got that way of seeing a number of steps ahead to work out what needs lining up with what's going to trip him up 5 steps down the line, whereas I tend to go in, do it, and then find out I've got to cut something back off to access something else. Stu's always those steps ahead, always thinking ahead. So when you see him sort of looking at something and pondering, he's usually thinking a lot further ahead than you might imagine. So that's really good. And then if we walk around here, we'll see the calamity that is the Aston Martin. Calamity in a good way, however. This is all planned. However, it is missing quite a lot, as you can see. We've decided to take the plunge. I did a last bit of checking of CAD yesterday and decided that there's not a lot more we can do without starting to chop bits of the car off. So Matt's just finished literally chopping the front off, making sure that we don't damage any bits that we think we might want to keep, although there's a lot we're not going to be keeping. We're trying to preserve most of the bulkhead. I don't think we're going to use very much of it, but we're just preserving it just in case. We don't have a completely solid plan on that yet. We have CAD of what's passing through where and what needs to be modified. And we need to do a little bit of work in terms of, we've got CAD of where the HVAC is likely to be capable of fitting. Luke's done some work on that. And we've just got to weigh up whether it's more economic for the customer for us to just cut the whole lot out and refabricate it, or whether it's more economic and a nicer end result to keep some of the original and fabricate sort of within it. And they're the sort of decisions that we have to make on the fly, and we can't really make those until we're another step or two down the line. It would be nice to be able to plan everything from the start, but I have to say my brain isn't capable of that, and I don't think many people's are really. If they are, then give us a call about coming to work here. But my brain hits the overload point before I get that far, and I have to work a stage at a time. Otherwise, it's very easy to outpace yourself, run into a whole load of unforeseen problems, or get too far down the line and discover there's an unforeseen problem that then involves undoing lots of work. It's generally better to work a stage at a time, plan that stage, work out what the pitfalls in that stage are, complete that stage, then move on to the next one. Especially, bear in mind, all these are one-off vehicles. You know, they're not a production car. We're solving problems on the fly as we go. So yeah, car's cut back to the bulkhead. Front end you saw over there. Matt's now taking the floors out and the rear sections of the centre chassis rails, which just finish halfway down the floor. They finish under the seat mount anyway, so they don't transmit anything through to the back of the car. And you'll be able to sort of see now, looking at that, the structure that we're going to be replacing this with, which is going to be fairly similar to what's there now in a way, in that there's effectively a rectangle with a gap in the middle at the front, which forms the main chassis of this car. It's a perimeter ladder frame. The rails in the middle do not go all the way to the back. They come into a torsion box that goes under the seat mountings. We will be adding seat mountings which will act as a torsion box, but I'm also building the perimeter frame quite a lot heavier duty than the original Aston perimeter frame. And we're putting the loads into it differently to what Aston did, so effectively the perimeter frame is under slightly different stresses in our application. But we're basically fitting some front and rear chassis rails to carry the suspension loads and the engine and transmission loads, a box perimeter frame in the centre of the car, and then we'll be running some smaller rails down the centre, either that form the corners, the lower corners of the transmission tunnel. And that's the main structure of the car. You'll have seen it all on CAD. You've probably seen it on our Instagram on the little video that George did with it being built like an Airfix kit. And on that note, the first parts of the Airfix kit are actually in the boot of the car. I think Jamie will have some footage of them, but within the boot of the car are some of the various sections that Matt's been fabricating, and he's been using. George has done him some templates. We make these template sections for using the hand plasma cutter to cut out sections to enable us to put radiused bends. So as an example, that's the front cross member. You can see the radiused outer corners on that. And they're set using a template cut like this, which we draw in CAD. And then we can run the plasma cutter around that, and it creates the correct shape cutout within the piece to enable us to then fold it and create the radius bend. So neat way of doing it, just results in a nice solution at the end. But yeah, we've got the front and rear chassis rail sections cut. They need a couple of final bits of trimming in, but they're basically ready to go. The CAD for all the laser cutting work is at Mac Industries now, who are hopefully going to be working through that in the next X number of days. I'm hoping next week we should get some parts from Mac, because they're doing all of the laser cutting. We've got local laser cutters we could use, but given that Mac have been very kind to us and very helpful to us, we're giving them some work their way and entrusting them with a big pile of laser cutting for this job. And there is a lot of parts. George has worked through, and there is a hell of a list of parts that have got to be laser cut for this, and quite a bit of folding as well. So they're going to also be doing they can use their CAD CAM setup to set up their 2 Armada lasers, do all their laser work, and then they can also use that same CAD CAM to set up their press brake and do all the folding that we need. I think there's one part where we're going to have an issue folding it, but we wouldn't have been able to fold it either, so we've got to split that part. All the others they can fold. You'll see all that come together as the parts roll up, as all the big pile of plate comes, probably on a pallet. Then we can start the major fabrication in earnest. You saw not last week, week before, because I was off last week. Week before, you saw the nicely shot blasted and powder coated Select jig bench. Once this is all cut apart and sorted, we'll get this out of the way, get the Select jig in, get it levelled up. We've got the working platform to work from. We can start building the chassis on the Select. Once the chassis is put together on the Select, the main box sections are put together. We'll build the front and rear sub-assemblies using the laser cut parts on the Mac fabrication table. There'll be laser cut parts from Mac being cut on a Mac fabrication table. So there you go, watch this space on that. Once they're done, we can slide them onto the rails, fixture the whole lot onto the Select bench, weld all that lot out, then plop the Aston on top, and it's all done, simple as that. At that point, I think it's probably going to be time. I think I'm going to just do the body shop today. Mark's actually off on he's had a bit of a DIY disaster at home, I think. He's had a water leak that he's trying to sort out. So I think I'm going to do the body shop, and actually Mark will be talking more about his parts role anyway now, which I think we've covered, but Mark's moved on to looking after our parts department, which I'll let him elaborate on in the future, unless he did last week. I haven't seen last week's video. In terms of the body shop, I'll just talk about it from here actually, because Gaz has also been on holiday. He's just got back today, so he's doing some of the final prep on XJC parts, which I think he's nearly there with, and then he is, I know, currently working on the hardtop for the E-Type, because there's a bit of modification needed at the back of that, and there's a lot of horrible old paint needs removing from it. So he's removing the old paint, and then he's getting that ready so that we can pop that back onto the E-Type and then do some fill out basically. There's a couple of areas where the car is lower now than it was originally, so there's a slight gap, 4 and 5 millimeters gap between the hard top and the new body shape. So we're going to fill that out with some fiberglass paste just to get the edges back. The hard top is a fiberglass hard top, so that will give us the fill we need to just get that a tidy edge all the way around, and then that will be the hard top pretty much done. There's not a lot more to it than that, so yeah, just getting that shaped up. So that's what Gaz is working on at the moment. There'll be more to report on body shop next week. Once Gaz has had a full week in there. He's just walked in now. Actually, he's brought the weather back from Florida, I think, because it's pretty toasty now. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to hand over to Cal. Let him take you through the assembly shop and etc.
Thank you very much, Nat. The sun is shining, it's an absolutely gorgeous day. And I'm in front of this absolutely gorgeous car, which is actually one of Martin's cool little collection that he's got. This is a 1946 Standard 8. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know much about these cars, but what I do know is this one is absolutely immaculate. Martin's the 4th owner, and there's an amazing story whereby he actually bumped into the 2nd owner, whose parents owned it from new, at a standard show not that long ago, who was completely blown away because he thought it had been scrapped years before. It's just an awesome thing. You know, just after the war this would have been. It's got the original kind of brochure for the car here, loads of cool documents with it. What a cool thing this is. And a great day to just tootle around in something like that as well. Right, moving inside and fast forwarding about, well, actually, not as many years as you might think. I was going to say about 50 years, but I mean, 68 probably, isn't it? So it's actually remarkably, we're only fast forwarding 20 years. I hadn't planned this at all, but that's actually completely blown me away. That this is 20 years after that, and yet another, how many years has passed since this? It's I don't want to do the maths, but this is something that I think Nat and I have talked about a few times in the past, that there was a period of development in cars that was just phenomenal between basically this bit here, 46 to 68. And I know this is obviously highly modified, but still the change is, you know, there's just no comparison. Whereas actually the advancement from this to now is by comparison very small, considering it's a much greater number of years past. Anyway, I've been out on the road, hence all the plastic film on this. I've done a couple of journeys now. In the early stages of road testing, it's basically going out, formulating a snag list, letting the guys here go through the snag list, going out again. So my first one had a relatively small snag list. Second one, very little at all now. It's really going quite well. A lot of it's just, I'm taking Alex out in the passenger seat on the laptop, and it's just going through the map details. And you would think it would be super exciting, driving fast performance car down all the lovely lanes around here. In reality, the vast majority of what we're trying to do is drivability stuff. So we're intentionally trying to get stuck in traffic and basically putting it through at paces at slow speed stuff, because the full throttle stuff's easy. It's the drivability, you know, pulling away at junctions, whether it's uphill, downhill, moving along in traffic where you're almost just going along at idle in gear, first gear, second gear, just at idle. Those transitions just off idle to very light throttle when you're moving along in traffic, where maybe you almost come to a halt and then you pull away again. All those little bits where you've got to you're trying to create every scenario. We've been working we had a little shunt in it where when you were decelerating, you were basically off the throttle completely, going through around the sort of 1500 RPM range. You just started to get a little bit of a shunt with zero throttle on, which was just because it was just switching between 2 load cells, 2 fueling sites. So we were just trying to sort that out. A little bit of work on the throttle pedal maps, fly-by-wire, and obviously one of the beauties of this and the reason we've done it is because you can really iron out the throttle pedal mapping. So one of the things immediately that was when we were just pulling it off around the yard, it was a little bit too aggressive on light throttle. You know, a small movement of the pedal would make quite a big difference to the throttle. So we've changed that, made it less linear, so in the lower percentage throttle pedal movements make less of a change to the throttle opening, and then when you're at higher ranges it's more linear then, so it just makes it more easy to drive. So when you're going over bumps in the car, you're not kind of going on and off the throttle. But we're doing really well. We've done, I think, 60 odd miles in it now, and I'm pretty happy with the drivability stuff. We've got a little bit more work, so we haven't gassed the aircon yet. We're going to do that next. Then we're going to just go back over the idle control with the aircon kicking in and out, that sort of thing, and just try and get some miles on it. Project 1, the sister car, we handed over with 500 miles on it. This one's going further afield, so I'm keen to get probably double that on it, to be fair, and just try and get through as many initial niggles. They call it, or I have certainly heard it called, and very appropriately, the bathtub curve of faults. And if you imagine a graph that's like this, like a bathtub, you initially start with lots of faults, and then as you kind of get miles on it, they go down and down and down, and then obviously the usage of the car is down here, and then you start getting faults due to high mileage, when then the graph goes back up again. So that's where we're at with that. Interceptor, cracking on with some general assembly actually, and some very nice looking parts on this. So been looking at getting the HVAC assembly all together. Got the vintage air unit in there. There's a little 3D printed adapter onto the bulkhead here for that. We've started getting the panel work in that adapts to the vents on the dash. So what we've actually got is Bentley organ stop vents, as they call them on this. We've got this panel, which I'll just quickly show you here, which goes on the inside of the bulkhead, holds 4 of those Bentley vents. The centre 2 are actually directly connected to the piece I just pointed to on the bulkhead here, so they get fresh air. So you can open and close them on the little organ stops, but the centre 2 vents are just fresh air from the scuttle vent. And then the outer 2 are HVAC, so heating and aircon via the vintage air unit here, which is actually mounted longitudinally in this car. It was one of the big challenges during the metalwork, was trying to get that in with a relatively small area behind the dash. So we actually ended up with it longitudinally out this way, which is good because it means we've got the hoses coming straight into the engine bay, the refrigerant hoses, and then we actually have the fan in a housing in the engine bay itself, which then has a duct running all the way down here to some 3D printed ducting under here, which intakes fresh air from the front. And on the subject of under here, Gibbo's been making the nylon arch liners. I say nylon, it might be ABS actually, but ABS arch liners that fit to the tabs that Bobby welded around the inner wing under here, which basically shield all the back of the headlight and the front of the valance from dirt and stones off the wheels. George Sinclair has been on the brake reservoirs, so we've got a newly available servo and master cylinder in this. Originally the reservoirs were actually remoted, but it looks a bit scruffy because you've got the hoses and then they've got to be mounted somewhere. We didn't want it to be like that, and there wasn't an integral reservoir of the right angle that literally fitted straight to that master cylinder and was available new. But what we found is a Willwood reservoir pair. It's like 2 reservoirs that are designed to be on an angled master cylinder together like that were extremely close to what we wanted. So we've got those. George has now fabricated a pair of little machine spigots with a bracket between them that hold those spigots onto the master cylinder into the little fluid seals, and then the reservoirs themselves then slip over some O-rings and clip into place on there. So that's going to look really nice, and they're black as well, which is good because we're kind of keeping a sort of low-key satin black theme going throughout here. And then James, he actually was on this last week, but I forgot to mention it, the column downlink. So we've used, I think it's a Range Rover universal joint, which has an integrated rubber isolator in it, which we really want on a car like this, which is kind of a GT car. Nice to have a bit of an isolation in the steering column, just so you don't get too much road vibration through it. So we're using that, but it's got a bit of a odd detail on the actual shaft itself. It's not just your standard 3/4 shaft with a flat on it. So James has drawn up the downlink. He's 3D printed a prototype, which is in there now, and that's all looking good, so we can send that drawing away to be machined for the final part. So that is where we're at on this. Allegro, actually I'll tell you what, Camaro's on the ramp, so we can start tackling some of the final jobs on that. You'll probably have noticed it's kind of been pushed to one side for a bit, which wasn't a particularly intentional thing, but we've had that much going on. So it's nice to get that back over there because we're basically buttoning up the remainder of the wiring, got the interior to go, and we're just going to be going through, starting to spanner check everything on the underside. So kind of pushing through that through to being able to do final testing in it. Churchill's on the ramp for the exhaust fit, so we got the manifolds back from Zerkatech, which have now been ceramic coated. Really impressed with their service as always, and we have a bit of a deal going, so if you guys use the code RETROTECH on Zerkatech's website, or even if you want to ring them and place an order, you can use the same code to get a discount. Yeah, in terms of heat management products, they are kind of the best in the country, so well worth using them. And yeah, exhaust is going, so the manifolds are now on. The beautiful bracket that Stu made to hold the heat shield is on. The heat shield will be going on very shortly, and then we'll be able to get the system in. So that really gets close to buttoning up all of the mechanicals underneath. Once that exhaust's on, I think we'll be dropping this down in preparation for carrying on with the interior, which is an exciting prospect because James we'll go and see what he's been up to very shortly. He's now on board. We kind of peeled away. You'll have noticed we were kind of building up to progress on the interior on Churchill, and then we sort of peeled away from it because the same customer owns the Mercedes SL 500 that we've just been doing the interior on. So because I only really had one upholstery guy, he peeled away to do that and then to come back onto this again. So we should be seeing more progress on that soon. Leg row, continuing with the wiring. So engine management harness was all chucked in there, chucked in, that's a really that's a really crude term, but basically engine management wiring harness was thrown in there last week so we could check all the lengths, make sure everything was right before we start terminating. That's been taken back out, so Steve can now start terminating all that. Alex has now laid in the front end wiring harness, so there's a front leg that has a socket on the far side of the bulkhead that runs forward and does all the chassis part of the front end, so headlights, horns, screen wash, fans, anything that's not attached to the engine. So that's being laid in for trial fit at the minute. As soon as that's been checked and any lengths corrected on that, that can come out and be terminated, and yeah, at that point we'll have both of them ready to go in. And then because we've got the upper dash in now, we can start cracking on with making the lower dash components. And in my conversation with James earlier today, also said we can crack on with the carpets in that now, so we should see all the interior go together pretty quickly. In fact, I'm just wondering whether at this point last week I hadn't put some of the things in that are now in on this. Was the dash in last week? Yeah, I don't think I'd put the parcel shelf in though, which is now in, so buttoned up the wiring to the rear heated screen. All the anodising came back last week, week before, so that included the speaker grills, so the rear parcel shelf's now in, and on the C-pillars, the 3D printed vent trims that we've made are now fitted as well on this one, so C-pillars externally are buttoned up, and then the fuel caps, which we've now trial fitted and made the necks for, have just gone away for anodising, so there's a whole batch of anodising just gone black, so fuel caps are one, the instrument binnacle, we trial fitted that was all good, so they've gone to be anodised. Just pulled the trigger on 3D printing the final rear housing parts for the steering wheel, so they're the bits that are fluorescent greeny yellow on this. They're being a black 3D printed final part. And I just took the column shroud for this car over to James so he can leather that. That's going to be leathered in the brown leather, and that is just a standard Integra Type R column shroud. So yeah, kind of very exciting because there's not a lot now standing in the way of all of the interior going into this, and we're not far off having the engine bay wiring done as well. So all very exciting. On that note, let's go down the den, see what's going on down there. Oh, hang on, no. On that note, don't go down the den. Don't see what's going on down there. Go up to the CAD layer and see what George and Luke have been up to.
And then pan gently to me. Welcome to the CAD kennel. So this week we've been doing a smattering of different things. I've been mainly on with the same stuff as per bloody usual. I don't know if I can actually say that on YouTube or not. Well, it's going in. It's going in. So I've been on with a smattering of AC stuff, as has been the kind of theme of the last couple of weeks. This is becoming quite irritating how long it's taking. It's one of those tasks that we get here every now and again where it feels like it's not going to take very long to design an entire AC system. But yeah, it actually does. So we're working through it, and it's just been very bitsy, but it feels like we're actually can see the light at the end of the tunnel now. So I'll give Jamie some actual proper B-reel, but yes, was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, and beginning of yesterday, Matt actually got a load of the modifications done to the actual car to get all of this gubbins, and it's not even on my desk anymore because it's in the car, mounted in so we can test all the prototypes and different bits and bobs. There's some modifications that's going to be needed, so the actual fitment of it all fits, but getting it in is incredibly tight because it's an E-Type. So what we're actually doing is we're going to be modifying this adapter mount. So because we're fitting this whole system 90 degrees to how it normally is, we need to modify where all the vents from. So this has the condenser inside of it and creates condensation. We don't want condensation in the car, so it's standard. It's got these drip pipes here, but now where we've turned it 90 degrees, they're not going to work. So we've created this little adapter plate here, which has got drip pipes in it, but because of the lack of room in the car, we actually want to try and move the fan up. So this is the angle it was at. We've now twisted it and lifted it up, and I'm going to have to redo this little adapter piece in the aim to give us a bit more room to play with. It's just the ever-going process of doing what you think is going to work in the design, actually trying to go, oh, it's a bit tighter than I thought, and then having to inevitably change it, and that's kind of the iterative process, which I'm sure you've noticed from me and Luke and most design things here. And then it's just been working through other things, so getting some of the ducting done, getting all the gasket tolerances, because we're going to have a 3mm neoprene gasket between every mounting surface, making sure it all fits. Or it's just a process of lots of little jobs which aren't very interesting to the camera, but all need to be done and all take more time than you think. What I've also been on with is getting all the Aston Martin chassis stuff away for laser cutting. So that's gone to, I think, Mac Industries, where they're going to be getting everything laser cut to a nice accuracy. So the reason we're not doing it on our plasma is because the accuracy isn't quite up to snuff, and there's a lot of parts for that chassis design which kind of interlink, and it all kind of fits together in theory. So if we did it on ours, it wouldn't have probably worked very well. So that's all been sent off, and I've spent a lot of time labelling everything and archiving it and doing drawings and all very boring things which are mind-numbing, but they're all done now, so hopefully that'll be back with us soon, and it will then all fit together and well together and all be really nice and just go really smoothly. You can watch in a couple of weeks' time when that inevitably does not happen. But yeah, that's enough of what I've been on with. I will now pass over to Luke and what he's been on with.
Hi viewers, welcome back to the CAD Cafe, and this week is going to be a short update because I've only really done 2 days of work to update you about. Unfortunately, I was not feeling the best on Monday, and I'm off tomorrow. We'll not go into detail. So this week I have 2 dogs. This week I bonded together the MG center console, so that was printed over the end of last week, bonded and attached together, and I've literally just given that back to Cal so that can go back down to the den to James to trim it. And then other den work, back onto the VR6, there was we were talking about intake stuff before. Now we're actually sorting out where that air goes into the car. So there's these lower grills on it. I've just done a little duct which clamps quite nicely onto the back of that. So you can put a little bit of ducting on the back of that. Bring that up to the air intake box. That's prototyped and downstairs. I think Jamie can get a video of that when he goes down. That can get tested in the car and then printed in carbon. And then with retro power stuff, I've been sorting out rear light kind of tools, I guess, to now actually cut the holes in the car, which is very scary. But yeah, these slot in together and it will actually be a whole piece that then can be jigged on the back of the car, marked out here, cut through the car. I'll let Matt do that because I don't want to do that. And yeah, then we can mount the prototypes, which are just on that shelf, which I'll show Jamie in a second. And yeah, I think that's it for E-Type. And then, what else have I done? Yes, Churchill. So, Churchill air intakes. As with some things, when you build a car over the space of 2 years, you design stuff early on, and then maybe a part which you needed for that design isn't available anymore. So, we had that with the Churchill air intake, where we designed this kind of pipe work for it. And then the connecting rubber bit that went from the pipe that goes through the inner wing to the actual air intake wasn't available anymore. So we ordered a new one, and I've now edited or changed the design work now to match up with that. That is prototyping on the printer currently, and will be done in a few hours, so I can try that on the car. I've also incorporated the temp sensor and the breather pipe into that now as well. So that should be ready to go end of play tomorrow. And then I think that's everything major. I'm almost definitely forgetting some stuff, but yeah. Thanks guys, I'm gonna hand over to Cal.
Thank you very much, CAD guys. And this time I really am going to go down to the den and let's see what Nick's been up to.
Hello and welcome to a beautiful day at the den. New car, so we've got a Saab 9.5 Aero Hot, which is in a state of tune by Abbott Racing. So this is in for an inspection. I'm going to go through mechanicals, have a look. The guy really loves it. He loves Saabs. Obviously Saab don't exist anymore. So we're going to go through it mechanically, tidy it up, get it up to spec. It's done quite a lot of miles. Customer has also got an automatic version, so there may be kind of some donor car stuff going on, swapping bits around, making one good car out of two. So that's quite good. Looking forward to getting involved with that. MGB, last few mechanical bits on that. And we are sort of wrestling with this windscreen to try and get the windscreen to fit, because if anyone has fitted a windscreen on MGB, it's quite awkward because there's nothing to pull it down. You have to push it into place, and put the bolts in from the inside outwards, which is very awkward. And it's got a new seal, new bottom seal as well, so it's quite tricky. If anyone's got any tips, let me know. Be very grateful. So that is all very good. The XJC, we've not a massive update if I'm honest with you. We're sorting out the seat, so the headrests are a bit rattly in the seat. So we're just going to make a modification just to stop those rattling around. So the Merc, the big Merc, the 500 SEC, super cool car. This has come over from Spain. So we're doing mechanical inspection. It's in really good condition anyway, to be honest with you. So we're just going to go through, see if there's anything it wants. And we're going to be doing Apple CarPlay, have a look at a bit of interior, probably swapping the steering wheel out because the customer doesn't like the steering wheel. It's got a non-standard wheel in it. Yeah, mega car, and getting onto that. Doing the inspection today and tomorrow on this. All the inspections we do are a couple of days to do the mechanical inspection, go quite in depth with it, and then to write up the report, which is normally 4 or 5 pages, upload all the photos, and then the customers see that on Global Workshop system. So they've got all the information on the report. What have we got? The E30, we're just doing a oil service on that now, and Luke has had the wheels and all the brakes off. So we've tidied up the brake calipers and the discs. The discs had a bit of surface corrosion on the outer circumference. So we've basically just gently media blasted that, painted them, painted the inner spigots as well, and we've also done the calipers. While the wheels were off, our detailer just gave the wheels a deep clean and a fresh ceramic coat as well. So they are pristine again. The CSL, we've not done anything, but we will be doing a service and some big brakes. I think we talked about that, and we'll be doing the big end bearings as well in due course. Subaru, we've done the inspection on the Subaru now. Mechanically, it's really good. I mean, it's 10 years old, it's done 65,000 miles. It wants some wishbone bushes on the front, which are kind of at the end of their life. They're all perished and cracked, making a bit of a gaunching noise. I think primarily this is going to be about a cosmetic uplift really, and some entertainment, some infotainment stuff. So we'll go Apple CarPlay or Android for this customer, just to bring that up to date. And also customer doesn't find it very refined, so we're going to look at putting some more soundproofing in, I think, as well, and see if we can take a bit of that noise away. But essentially, yeah, mechanically, to be honest with you, really, really good. It's obviously been used really well, enjoyed from new by the current owner, and it's just really the body that lets it down a little bit. So that will look pristine when we finished with it. Barchetta is all but done. That's just waiting on an MOT slot at our local MOT station. But that is all done, so there's nothing really to talk about that. We're still not talking about that. Alpha's work in progress, and I think that's it from the den this week. So I'm going to be handing back to Cal now.
Well, and you're now actually back with Scruff Bag because Cal ran out of day. So we're going to have a little catch up with James in the trim shop next week, and Cal will squeeze all that in next week. But that's a wrap for this week. We'll see you next time. Like and subscribe, please, because we're heading our way perilously close to 70,000 subscribers now. So it'd be good to get a few more on board. So if you're watching, please subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Just gets our little subscription level up a little bit. So that'll be good. And see you in a week's time.